In public, Carnegie was a strong supporter of labor and a worker's right to organize. But he ran his company with an iron fist.
Carnegie had gotten rid of every union at every one of his other plants and was absolutely determined that he was going to get rid of the union at Homestead. But Carnegie was a very, very smart man and understood public relations. He did not want to appear to be a strikebreaker or a union buster. So his strategy was to come up with what he could argue was the fairest possible settlement and give it to the union in such a way that the union could not possibly accept this.
The deal breaker in the negotiations was over how wages would be set for the skilled workers.
All along, there was never any intention to compromise. There was going to be an untenable floor set for the wage scale, and there was going to be, this anniversary date was going to be set December, I think 31st of every year, when steel prices would be at their historic low. And that was that. Carnegie and Frick were two hard-headed, powerful businessmen, and they hated the fact that anything could be dictated to them by some union, some association of working men, whom they did not essentially respect or see as their equals.
As expected, negotiations broke down. Frick's last words to the amalgamated were, "Gentlemen, this ends all conference between you and this firm." Meanwhile, Frick had been preparing for a battle. Earlier that spring, he ordered a 3-mile fence to be built around the mill.
He had fortified the perimeter of the Homestead Works. He had ordered the construction of a 10-foot wooden fence with observation turrets and barbed wire strung along the top of it. It looked like a prison encampment, and it led workers to rename the Homestead Works Fort Frick because they could see what was coming.
The people of Homestead were preparing for battle too. "We are asking for nothing but our rights," said Mayor John McLucky, "and we will have them if it requires force to get them." Frick had notices posted all over the town. To keep his job, a worker would have to declare himself non-union. Frick then shut down the entire mill, locking out all of the men.
You have to understand that it's a lockout, not a strike. The Carnegie Corporation locks the workers out. They will not allow them to come back to work under the terms of the old contract.
More than 3,000 workers unanimously voted to reject the company's final offer. On June 30th, the union contract officially expired. The strike was on. Early July, 1892, Homestead, Pennsylvania. 3,800 striking steel workers were locked out of Andrew Carnegie's steel mill. The very existence of Homestead's union was now at stake. Homestead was expecting an invading force of strikebreakers. The union leadership answered with 3 divisions of men to patrol the town, looking for any signs of trouble. Strike leader Hugh O'Donnell, a first-generation Irish-American who worked in the mill, promised no violence. But his message couldn't be clearer. The workers would very gently but very firmly push the scabs away from here. Henry Clay Frick, Carnegie's business partner, felt he needed protection for the non-union workers he was bringing in. He made arrangements with the Pinkerton National Detective Agency, the country's largest private security force.
Now, the Pinkerton Agency had more men in it than the Standing Army of the United States of America, and had just been outlawed in Ohio for being hired as somebody's private army. But in Pennsylvania, that law had not been passed, so Frick was not doing anything unlawful in hiring 300 Pinkertons and keeping them on wait.
With the Pinkertons at the ready, Frick wrote to Carnegie in Scotland, laying out his plans.
He said, I've negotiated with John Pinkerton. He's sending watchmen. We're bringing them in by boat so that the workers won't see them coming in. Once we've taken control of the plant and the water entrance to the plant, we'll begin to bring in scabs. We're going to try to do it in secrecy. We hope there won't be any violence, but we're prepared for a long strike and a battle if need be.
On July 5th, under the cover of darkness, 2 barges pulled by a tug made their way toward the mill. Of the 300 men on board, only 40 were regular employees of the Pinkerton Agency. The rest had signed on for a job that was a mystery.
This is not some elite commando force. These were guys hired off the street in Philadelphia and in New York and in Chicago who were of the same social stripe as the people standing on the bank shouting at them to turn around and go home.
On this day, as the barges made their way up the Monongahela River, Frick was at his estate 5 miles from the mill. Andrew Carnegie was preparing for a day of fishing in the remote Scottish Highlands.
What Carnegie Steel didn't count on was that the workers would know every movement that the Pinkertons made. And so when the Pinkertons were brought by barges, the workers in Homestead knew what was going on and met them at the dock.
It's a wonderful scene in American history. It's dark, and the guys are riding it almost like Paul Revere. The Pinkertons are coming, the Pinkertons are coming! And these barges come up, and they're ready to deploy, and the workers knock through the fence, they run down through the mill, they seize the mill, and there are the Pinkertons down on the boats.
By 4 a.m., July 6th, a crowd 1,000 strong, armed with muskets, rocks, and pistols, whatever they could carry, broke through the fence surrounding the mill on their way to the river. At the front of the group were Hugh O'Donnell and Margaret Finch, a steelworker's widow. She carried a billy club, shouting for the chance to get at those dirty black sheep. "We'll send them home on stretchers," said one worker. "Hell will be full of new pictures in the morning."
The barges approached, and Hugh O'Donnell stood on the dock. And as one of the Pinkerton captains got out, O'Donnell said, "I speak to you as working men, I speak to you as a man. Stop now, there will be bloodshed. Don't take our jobs. Stop."
It was, a real standoff. And as the shouts grew higher and higher in volume, no one was certain what was going to happen.
As the Pinkertons prepared to leave their barge, a shot was fired. Nobody knows who fired the shot. But all it took was that one shot, and all hell broke loose. Chaos reigned.
The first volley lasted 10 minutes. It was said that 1,000 shots were fired before the guns stopped blazing. At 8 a.m., the Pinkertons once again attempted to take the mill. "There seemed to be sharpshooters picking us off," said one of the Pinkertons. "At first they fired straight at us, but after a while they fired through the aisles on the side, and they would shoot men who thought they were safe." There were casualties on both sides. The workers, however, suffered the most losses in the initial exchanges.
A number of workers were killed, 4 in all initially. It was one from each of the major ethnic groups. And that fact, which I think was pure coincidence, helped to unify the workers, skilled and unskilled, to fight the Pinkertons.
5,000, 6,000 people have come to watch this fight. It's like a big brass knuckle prize fight of that era. They all come to town to watch it. The trains are bringing people in. It's a great event.
The men and women on the shore were determined to sink the barges at any cost. They tried soaking a raft with oil and setting it on fire, ramming a burning rail car into the barges, sticks of dynamite, even loading a cannon with scraps of steel. The tugboat left the scene with a number of wounded Pinkertons, stranding the remaining guards.
The Pinkertons were scared to death, as they should have been. They had no idea what was going to happen. They were marooned on this barge, unable to move back into the, back to get away, unable to land. And the crowd was increasingly hostile and out of control.
A white flag was repeatedly raised. The enraged workers shot it down. After 12 hours of battle, a surrender was negotiated. The Pinkertons were promised no harm would come to them. In their history, they had never suffered such a defeat. By 6 p.m., the Pinkertons were unloaded from the barges. The people of Homestead formed 2 lines leading into the town, a gauntlet 600 yards long.
The Pinkertons began to march off, and bedlam broke out. As each Pinkerton came off the barge, they were kicked, they were punched, they were hit with sticks and stones as they reached shore and were marched as prisoners, bloodied, beaten prisoners, all the way into Homestead.
The Pinkerton men screamed for mercy, one paper reported. They were beaten over the heads with clubs and the butt ends of rifles. You could almost hear the skulls crack. The Pinkertons, defeated, bruised, demoralized, were boarded onto a train that would take them out of Homestead for good. "Goodbye, boys, don't try it again," shouted one steel worker who had come to see them off. For the workers, it was a victory, at least for the moment. July 6th, 1892. The day the Pinkertons were defeated at Homestead, their barges were burned by the mill. In all, 7 workers were killed in the battle, along with 3 Pinkerton guards. Hundreds of Pinkertons were injured during the running of the gauntlet.
I think in the immediate aftermath, when the actual firing stopped, the Union believed they had won. So there were these brief few hours in which it seemed as though there was a bright new future for these people.
Homestead had become a workers' republic in revolt. The steelworkers set about repairing the fence and patrolling the mill property, guarding it against another attack by the owners of the mill. They would not give in to the Pinkertons, strikebreakers, or Carnegie and Frick. American opinion was sharply divided in the days following the battle.
There was a good deal of sympathy for the workers and outrage at a private army having been hired by Carnegie and Frick to do their bidding. But I also think that there are a sizable number who believe that the workers had gone too far and that this was Carnegie's mill and that they had no business tearing down the fence and defending their town with their guns.
You cannot invade somebody's private property. And so, although the workers were clearly correct in wanting a more pay and a better life, they played right into Frick's hands. The strikers did seize the mill and did keep them from operating it and did wreck property. It strengthened his case.
Upon hearing the news of what had happened in his mill town, Andrew Carnegie cabled Frick from Scotland. "All anxiety gone since you stand firm. Never employ one of those rioters. Let grass grow over the works. Must not fail now." Homestead Mayor John McLuckie wired the Pennsylvania Governor, Robert Pattison, that order was maintained in the town. Under pressure from Carnegie Steel, however, the governor saw no choice but to act. On July 12th, rail cars carrying 8,500 members of the state militia arrived in Homestead. Strike leader Hugh O'Donnell and others representing the town government and the Union met with General George Snowden, the leader of the militia.
O'Donnell protested, we are law-abiding. All we want, and Snowden cut